Welcome to the special board meeting, USD 464 for Thursday, July 23rd. We got a few people watching. I'm sorry for the folks. It'll be recorded and posted online. This time I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Stephanie, second by Justin. All in favor, raise your right hand. Chris?
Aye.
All right, motion carried. With that, we'll move into the school reopening plan, to preliminary discussions with the administration team. I think everybody got a copy of that today. I know there's a lot of questions. I think just reminded that we're kind of in the preliminary stage and trying to help the administrative team work through a very challenging and difficult assignment here. So you got Karen on?
Yeah.
Karen, Audra, Karen's joining the meeting by phone as well, so hope she can hear. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Lauren and let you go ahead and present.
Okay, if you go to your documents from the agenda, you'll see the Tonganoxie USD 464 Strategic Reopening Plan. And this is a culmination of several weeks of work and input from the administrative team, the building leadership team, Kansas State Department of Education. I mean, just a numerous amount of areas of expertise that we relied on as we move forward with this process. There's been, from my perspective, a tremendous amount of communication with Leavenworth County Superintendents as we share, our concerns and how things look from our each of our school districts' perspective. We have weekly KSD meetings with Dr. Randy Watson on Thursday for about an hour. We've been having those since the beginning of this shutdown. And so there's another opportunity to share opportunities which has gone into this. And then lastly, the Frontier League superintendents have been working together on this. One of the things we've asked our school district to do, and Tanya has been an integral part of putting this all together, and she has been very, very involved in this process, along with administrators from each building level, and like I said, building leadership teams from each building level. So that's kind of my intro to this, and I know that there's a lot of anxiety from the parents, the community, the staff, the students, about the direction we're headed. And I guess one thing I want to just quickly say is, I think everybody understands this is a moving, changing process for us. And it's an example of that was even yesterday, when the governor came out with an executive order, like it or dislike it, and even the State Board of Education votes 5-5 on whether or not they're going to follow those executive orders. And so there's a split. So we feel like obviously we feel like we're in a very difficult situation, but on the other hand, we welcome this discussion. I mean that. We welcome this discussion with the Board of Education and community and anybody that's listening, this is being downloaded and saved. We'll be able to watch. We encourage that kind of discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya, I think, at this point, unless you guys have any questions of me. And I did want to, and we also appreciated the questions that I think were sent. Most of the questions that were sent in today helped guide some of this discussion tonight. So that was helpful, I think, for Tanya. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya.
All right. One of the things that is forefront in my mind is that none of us has been prepared for a pandemic. I never thought in a million years I'd be dealing with a pandemic in my lifetime. So this has been very interesting and difficult for all of us. We had our own families to worry about in the spring, but then also keeping school running. In the spring, it was a totally different story because it was an emergency. We had to make decisions on a moment's notice, and we followed KSDE guidelines and Kansas Department of Health and Environment the whole way. So that being said, what we're working on now, we've learned some things from the spring, and there has been better planning and time and effort put into this. So we are hopeful that what we've come up with and the guidance that we've been given will be good for our students and our staff and our community. So we have some guiding documents that you have in your board packets. One of those is the Navigating Change document that was put together by over 1,000 people that worked with the Kansas State Department of Education. There were Kansas Health Department of Health and Environment who worked, administrators, health officials, educators, stakeholders, all kinds of folks that worked on that. So that is our guiding document that we have taken everything from. That document, it is huge. It's 1,089 pages. So it starts out and looks at the education piece of it and then the operations piece of it. So as we've considered this whole redoing of education that we're looking at and reopening with schools, we had two guiding principles also. One was health and safety of our staff and students and our community. That's first and foremost. And then number two would be the education piece of it, the academics, the learning environment. We've also, as an administrative body, had to remove all of our opinions, our politics. None of that could come into this. So whether you believe conspiracy theories or it's all political, whatever you believe, we had to take all of that out of this. So we are just looking at it from a strictly, just a very objective viewpoint. So we started with this piece, and the first part of it, which is in the middle of your document, gosh, in the thousands,
Well, I think
would
it's
be
about page 990.
900 something, yes, is the operations piece of it. So that's the point, that's the portion we're going to focus on tonight. There are some guiding principles in here, and part of the operations piece of it talks about what we've talked about in our plan. So on-site learning environment, what does that mean? Hybrid, what does that mean? Remote learning. We have some very stringent health and safety measures that we'll be putting into place, and that has been forefront in our mind as well. So that is a part of this. And if you read through and look through all these pieces of it, a lot of this is defined already for us. So what does it mean if you have been diagnosed? What does it mean? What does the infectious period mean? How do you define a close contact? Those things are all within this guiding document, and we will use that as our guide. So we have taken information from there and we've put a portion of it into our reopening plan, which is the other document that you have. So guiding principles in here, but there's further information here. So we will be using a combination of both documents. So if something's missing in our reopening plan, then it's referred to in here. So I would challenge you to take the time to read through, especially that operations portion of it that really tells about the health and safety piece that we're really focusing on. So in our strategic reopening plan, we have planned for a few things, the types of learning environments. None of us would like more than just to come back fully normal, full schedule, ready to go. We can be prepared for that, but we also have to be prepared for what we are being directed to by KSDE, Kansas Department of Health and Environment, CDC, Leavenworth County Health Department. So we are making plans for all scenarios. The on-site hybrid learning environment would be where students and staff are here part of the time and remote learning part of the time. And I'll go into what that means or what that might look like here in just a bit. The rigorous remote learning environment, the way things were in the spring with remote learning, just kind of toss that out of the window because it's going to be very different for the fall. It is more directed, more rigorous, and we are falling under the guidelines of Kansas State Department of Education. So when we talk about this many hours that you need to be engaged, that has been dictated to us by the State Department. So we are following under their guidance. Keep in mind this document is a living document, which means even after this meeting, it could be changed. We will change it as necessary based on health officials, what's going on in our community. So just keep that in mind as we look through it. So as you look at this plan, it talks about first the on-site and hybrid learning environment with enhanced safety protocols. Now, we do not cover every bit of the safety protocols in this because it is very well spelled out in this Kansas State KSDE document. So keep in mind, we have these things, we are preparing for these things, but it's within both documents. So we talk about hygiene procedures, going by the governor's guidance at this point, which has not been overturned yet. We are to wear masks in the building, staff, students, everybody. So if you look under there, it will spell it out for you, and then further guidance would be in this, this document. Additional PPE, so I've had some questions about that. What we have put on the school supply list for students is a mask or face covering and a refillable water bottle. We will provide the rest of the PPE as appropriate for our staff members. There's no additional PPE needed for our students at this point. So that's what we've been guided on thus far. We will have barriers up for secretaries. We have ordered some barriers for staff and students, so those things will be put into place. The next portion on page 2 of your document talks about exclusion from school. We know people are going to be sick, and this is a yearly thing. This is not just for COVID, but guidance. What we are going by is the current known symptoms. So if someone is exhibiting current known symptoms, we will exclude them from school, or they will exclude from school as appropriate. There is a picture of the document there which talks about cases, household contacts, non-household contacts, and then releasing cases from isolation and quarantine. So that is defined for us by Kansas Department of Health and Environment. We have some information on bus procedures in there. Talks about wearing masks on the bus, hand sanitizer when you are getting on the bus, assigned seating for students so they're not moving around. Socially distancing on a school bus is just really not possible unless we ran bus routes all day long. So it is what it is, and we are working with what we can on that. We'll fill the back of the bus first. Family members will sit together. When the bus is not full, we'll spread out as much as possible. We will be sanitizing the bus twice a day. So those things address some of the bus concerns. There are also more within the KSDE document. We have some classroom and building procedures as well that start on page 4, and that's if we are in a hybrid or on-site learning environment. And this is a lot to read through, and I know you probably have not had a chance to read through all of this thus far, but just know that there is a lot of information in here that will probably answer some of the questions that you may have. It does get into, on page 6, the difference between elementary and secondary buildings and how we will adjust schedules, restroom breaks, adjusting lunches, how we will deliver education through Google Classroom or on-site, and those items. Then it gives additional recommendations. We have a link to the document there, which is this KSDE document. The next portion deals with the remote learning. Now, the remote learning, again, is going to be very different than it was in the spring. We've had lessons learned from that, and we have more mandates and requirements from Kansas State Department of Education. So in this section where it alludes to the time allotment, where it says 6.5 hours daily, and all of these breakdowns in time, this is what the Kansas State Department of Education is requiring of us. This is not something that we just made up and thought it would be beneficial for kids. So we are going under their guidance.
The 6.5 hours is their guidance?
Yes, that is their guidance, yes. And we talked about this over the summer, well, it's actually late spring. We had a dyslexia training that Kansas State Department of Education put on, and those were their recommendations in that came from the national level too. So there are a lot of documents where that 6.5 hours and the breakdowns are referred to. So that's not just coming from Kansas either. We do go into a little more of what the remote learning looks like, but again, there will be more information coming out. We are putting together a remote learning handbook that will be very beneficial for not just remote learning, but if you are doing a hybrid back and forth. And keep in mind that we are scheduling this so that we can move seamlessly between all of these different learning styles or learning environments, because we may be called to close at a moment's notice. So on-site, hybrid, remote learning only, The way that we have things planned, and I'll get into a few specifics on that, will help us move toward either of the, or any of those seamlessly. The portion on page 9 really goes into staff resources and procedures. We talk about substitute teachers. Who knows whether we'll have enough substitutes this year? You know, substitutes are not full-time employees, they're not offered health insurance, so having substitutes, you know, that may be just a luxury. And we know we're going to have folks get sick, as we do any year. You know, you might just not feel well and need to be home, or your child may be sick, and you know, we'll have to deal with that. So we do have plans that we're working on within each building, how to adjust if and when we don't have subs. It does talk about there the health and how we are doing things, but again, there's more stringent protocol in the KSDE document. Hygiene measures. It gets very specific, defining a case of COVID and the infectious period. What does it mean to be a close contact? Return to school after exclusion. So if you have been untested but you have these symptoms, here are the steps there. If you're tested and awaiting results, what does that mean? If you have a positive result, or if you're an asymptomatic case or a negative result. And again, all this information, we're not making this up. It's come from the CDC, Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and Kansas State Department of Education, and then we're also working with the Leavenworth County Health Department. The thing is, once something is discovered, if we have a COVID case, we have to notify the health department, and then it's pretty much out of our hands. They will come in and decide who was a close contact, and they do their research. They have folks that do that, and then they will help us determine if we need to close a classroom, a hallway, a building, a district. So that portion is not something that is up to us.
Is that from, they have told us that? Is that the process?
I believe that the Leavenworth County Health Department is awaiting on further instructions from state level and other levels, so we have not had the luxury of meeting with them in person yet, but we anticipate that's going to happen very soon. That is my experience from the spring. We were told by the Leavenworth County Health Department what to do in certain cases, but now we're waiting for direction this fall. And as you know, things just change by the day and even by the hour with things that occurred yesterday.
My expectation, given how, you know, many of the companies, especially in Kansas City, that handle things, is when someone tests positive, they are able to follow the building and have it back up for the morning. You know, everybody's out by 6 p.m. Next morning at 8, it's back open.
And we do have a lot of those things that have been ordered, a fogger, you know, that does those things. There are some different suggestions in here about what we can do to close off a classroom, close off a hallway, close off an area of the building or a school building. So a lot of it's in here, but a lot of it, you know, will be directed by our local health department. And it seems like right now every health department is kind of doing their own thing, but I think that is, I'm hoping that will go away, but I'm hoping we get more information from our health department that we can share with you. As far as those two documents go, that's just going to take some reading and some digesting on your part. And again, keep in mind this smaller one is a living document, so we can update and change it any time. I did want to touch on a few talking points that may help answer some of your further questions. So that is the handout that you have at your place. What does hybrid look like? Well, hybrid could be a variety of situations. We would all love to start out everybody on site, everybody back to normal day one. However, we're at the mercy of our community and our county basically in what they're telling us is possible. So if we have spread, if we have this or that, we may have to go to the possible hybrid. So this is what our administrative team has been working on as a possible hybrid. Now keep in mind, I'm not telling you this is the exact hybrid we'll be going with, but this is what we're working on currently as a possible hybrid. So for example, this is an A-B hybrid schedule. So on a Monday, Group A would be on site. Group B would be attending remotely. They would be at home following the same schedule, and we would be live streaming our teaching to them. So the teacher would only be teaching once to all the kids at the same time. So Group A is at school on site. Group B would be at home remotely attending. On Tuesday, the reverse is true. Group B would then come on site. Group A would be at home learning remotely. The same would be true on Thursday, Friday. So if I'm a Group A kid, I attend Monday and Thursday on site, Tuesday, Friday at home. Now Wednesday is a day that we would propose to have Groups A and B attending remotely. So every student is at home that day. Staff would be here. We would have a condensed schedule. So students would only be live learning online remotely in the morning. And then afternoon time would be a lot of time to work and do activities, do labs. The teachers, on the other hand, in the afternoon would be participating in professional development, deep cleaning and sanitizing things, and then helping students in additional capacities if they needed those supports.
Tanya, you when you started talking about hybrid,
Mhm.
you said if we had to go to a hybrid schedule, but the survey reads that we would start with a hybrid schedule. So
Yes,
is-
right
are we-
now, that's what our community is looking like, and our county is looking at starting with hybrid because of the numbers in our community. So that's basically what we're being told at this point. It could change.
Being
Kansas
told
City,
by who?
Kansas is going all remote for the first 9 weeks. So our proposal would be start with a hybrid based on the numbers that we're seeing now. Now, if we have no COVID cases in the community, everybody's ready to go back as normal, we could start full-time, everybody on site as normal. I don't think that's realistic, but
Which numbers
Question of what's driving that?
is it new cases? Is it,
I do not know the answer to that. I mean, that's just what we're being reported, that in the metro area, this eastern portion, northeastern portion of the state is experiencing rise in numbers, so that the recommendation is a hybrid, not to just go everybody.
recommendation?
I think what I would say to that is, I mean, just from my perspective, my conversations with Leavenworth County Superintendents, their indication to me is that the school districts will be starting with a hybrid, this type of schedule. And I'm not saying, and I'm not saying we're being dictated to do that, but I know that through my conversations with other school districts, that's definitely the direction all the schools in Leavenworth County are headed toward.
And in our league as well.
Yes.
So is it part of the governor mandate that you have to stay 6 feet apart in the building, or is that a recommendation?
I think it depends. I mean, I think it's a recommendation.
It depends how you read it and which document. And
KASB did a live stream tonight just before we came here, and their answer was that they recommended 6 feet in the building unless there was a situation where everyone had full PPE on and needed to be together.
Then 3 feet.
Is what they said an hour ago.
And if that's what they're telling us, that we have to have students 6 feet apart, there's no way we can realistically do that with all of our students in the buildings at once. So we would have to start with
Well,
a smaller portion of students.
without, if they didn't have PPE.
Well, yeah, we don't have total PPE for every student. There's no way you can even get that.
I mean, I guess I'm struggling a little with how are we gonna define when we go to what level to what level? I mean,
Most of that will be dictated by the health department, but also our surrounding
do we anticipate,
communities.
I mean, I've looked at some other school stuff and it had the state had a plan and it said, we're in this phase, and this phase, and you have to follow this. I mean, it was pretty well defined of what you got. I mean, I guess it leaves us in
does.
it leaves us in a very awkward place. And so I don't know if we anticipate that definition to come from the county health department, or we're just trying to
County
be.
Health Department has given the school districts phases of what they can and cannot do. We have not received that same guidance.
We just haven't received that kind of direct guidance.
So what I'm hearing is there's no legal reason, there's no mandates or any legal reason that you couldn't start school as normal. There's nobody saying you cannot have a school full of, like in Iowa, it's different. Like they have different rules, obviously, in different states. But like in Kansas, there's no rules that say you cannot send everybody back to school. We're choosing to do that because at this point you feel like it's more like when you say that's what the community and the numbers dictate. So your feeling is that that's more socially acceptable. That's a more socially acceptable answer, or
Not necessarily.
Like, the only reason I'm asking is because there's a lot of people that come to school board members wanting to know, like, why can we not do that? Because we can't do that, it affects them financially. It affects their daycare. It affects their, everything as a parent, right? So if I don't have a concrete answer to say, we can't do that because it's the law. We can't do that because whatever the reason.
You can't do that because you can't social distance 6 foot away. You can't have that many kids in a room and still social distance. So there's where you cannot do it because you have to maintain that social distance.
The governor's executive order tells us that exactly, and the other are highly recommended from the CDC, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Kansas State Department of Education.
And I would say, Kyle,
Rooms aren't set up
what
to-
I'm getting is, these are all strongly recommended actions that we're following from KSDE,
Right.
from our administrative team, who is working with the staff, the teachers, on a nearly daily basis. And I have to agree with Stephanie. One of the big questions we have is the social distancing piece, and we cannot get 18 to 20 people in a classroom and still socially distance.
So I think my point is, and this may or may not reflect my personal opinion, which you said earlier. We need to be crisp on that answer, because there are schools that are not that terribly far from us that are going to start with kids in the school, full schedule, a few weeks late. And I'm not suggesting that that's my personal preference, but I think we have to be very crisp on that answer, because that is a valid question. So if the reason is social distancing, we probably ought to add it to our document. We probably ought to say that.
It's a huge factor, no doubt.
But then when you're talking about what the KSB video, Justin, that you were talking, they said you can become 3 feet apart or whatever closer if you have proper PPE. But so that's not a mask. That's more than a mask. Like, what is the definition of
Yeah,
that?
I didn't say that.
I'm seeing the term face covering and mask, which has historically been used separately to mean different things, almost being used interchangeably now, and I don't know if that's the intent or if I'm reading that correctly.
I think it is the intent. So,
Well,
Because when you say face covering, I'm thinking full face shield and,
it depends who you ask and whose definition you go by, I think.
But, I mean, it seems to me that, I kind of agree with Justin's point of defining how we guide some of this, and if we, I don't necessarily, it's kind of you guys are caught in the middle as well, but if it's Leavenworth County that's gonna dictate some of this, I don't know, we really need to get them
We need to be
out.
crisp on the answer. If it's because the governor said, maybe that's fine answer. If it's because the CDC said, maybe that's fine answer. If it's because this group said, that might be a fine answer too, but we need to be crisp on what that answer
it
is.
definitely is a combination.
It is, and it changes by the day.
And it's also school size, I would think, too. Depending on your school size, there are schools nearby us that have much smaller class sizes. They range in anywhere between sometimes 15 to 20 kids, where sometimes almost half of our classes are that, and it's going to depend on how big that school is.
yeah, physical, it boils down to square foot per student, per person. The building's big enough, you might be able to accommodate it.
Well, true, and you're not just talking about your students. There are staff members who may not feel safe coming back
Right.
and may not come back. So we've got to fill that gap, and if we don't have enough staff members to run the district,
And I can tell you guys that the staff safety weighs heavily on my building administrative team's minds. As we walked through this the last 3 to 4 weeks, we started here with, we gotta bring everybody back. We gotta bring everybody back on day one, make every opportunity to have that happen. And it has shifted and shifted. The social emotional piece has kicked in. The overall safety of not just the students, but the staff has been integral part of this whole conversation. And it's developed, this whole process developed.
I mean, and that's a real issue that people are facing, concerns. Has there been any quantification of that through anonymous surveys with regards to the feedback from?
We're doing an
we're
doing an HR survey following this meeting. The district office is closed tomorrow. I was sharing with Kaya that it'll probably go out Monday. And we are asking, I mean, real specifically, what is your intent? And if you can't come back, so please tell us what's the situation that weighs into that.
So I think the survey is a great idea, and frankly, I think the parent survey is a great idea. I guess I question, and we talked about it this morning, so I don't want to dredge up the old territory, but I don't know how the staff or the parents quite have enough information to be able to answer that survey adequately.
Yeah.
So I think this document is great. I think the 1,000-page document is great. I think this document's incomplete, and I know you would agree with that. But we're asking parents to make tough decisions with very, very skinny information.
Yes.
And so I think this kind of stuff helps with that, right? But I think we got to get there in short order.
Well, a lack of information breeds anxiety because
Yes.
people then start guessing what might happen.
Yes.
What I want to see is more transparency with regard, because what I'm hearing right now is reasonable. It's still, because people in general, and the feedback I've gotten, people are very understanding with regards to the complexity and challenges that are facing the district. But they still have to have an understanding of, if we don't know right now what that is, what are we waiting on, what are we working to get, and when do we think we will have that answer? So then they know, hey, we're working with that, so that the process is transparent, just not the results of it. So that people can start to plan what's going on. Because if we aren't communicating a way in which we're going to get it, when we're going to have it, what the priorities are, like understanding, I mean, there's some things in here that address some of the questions that I had sent with regards to households will be on the same schedule. There will be something that starts to provide, if we can communicate that, say, hey, we understand your perspective, and if you have other perspectives, where the survey comes in, because it helps to prioritize that, so we can develop a plan around the trends with regards to those priorities, then people are comfortable that, hey, my concerns are being heard, and that you're trying to work through and incorporate that to help work for me.
Yes. In our haste to send out a lot of information, we put the cart before the horse and sent the survey out before all this information, which was a mistake. Absolutely. So part of our process then is talking with you first about this information, and then disseminating all of this to parents so that we all have the same information and possibly revising survey. So
Yeah, I think when people read through and say, hey, here's how things are working within the school, we have identified the processes. There's a ton of work and there's a lot of definition within cleaning, spacing, PPE, that kind of stuff. What people are really concerned about is, am I going to be able to work this around my work schedule?
Yeah.
Right? Am I only going to be able to keep my job?
Daycare.
yes.
Daycare. That's like, people I think will generally have trust, say, hey, do you plan that you're going to execute that? But they need to know that they'll work within their life.
Yes. We have those same concerns. We have teachers who have those same concerns. All of us have those same concerns, and we have children in the district too, so we understand that. And there will be things that we are not able to provide answers to everyone on, in a lot of the what ifs, or how do I make this work within my
honestly,
family?
The what ifs, I wouldn't even go down that path. The what ifs, we're gonna have to solve those real time between now and till the cows come home. I think people will totally understand that. I think if we can say, here's what hybrid means, it's AB, you go on these days, here's what remote means, you're gonna get X amount of instruction you're gonna have a wide amount of time, you guys educate your kids yourselves, or whatever it looks like. A crisp answer about why we're not considering coming back full-time. I think that gives people what they need. The what if Billy's jumping on one leg and catches COVID, we'll figure that out when we get there.
Yeah.
But I think those are the core questions that we have to answer, like.
Well, and that if the situation with the household changes, we're gonna keep communication open, that, like you said several times, that due to a volatile and fluid situation, we have to remain flexible. We have to remain flexible with the parents, we have to remain flexible with the states, we have to,
County.
yeah, with the county, and so that if a situation with, like, that there's a lot of anxiety, we say, hey, we might be signing up for something, I don't know how, if this is just a preference, is there, so I think those are things that we need to make a list of, here's what is our guiding principles, our priorities, and make sure we continue to reference that, because the situation will oftentimes drag you down into details, you might forget some of those points. Keep reflecting back to that, so that we maintain our course.
Yes. I would like to just breeze through these few talking points on hybrid and calendar and survey and additional items, so everybody can hear the information, and then we can put a lot of this information out to the public so they have it as well, and they can see the recording of the meeting. So just so we're all on the same page with the same information. So looking at under the possible hybrid schedule there, as I said before, remote learning is going to be very different from the spring. It will be rigorous. Students learning remotely and on-site are going to be doing the same things and learning in real time.
I would add accountability.
Yes, yes. Your grades will definitely be affected by your level of participation in work. Families will be in the same group. If folks need to be in the same group for specific issues, maybe all these families go to this daycare or whatever, we can work that out. Families will be put in the same group. School start and end times are going to be the same as last year. So start at 7:45 at the high school, 7:55 at the middle and elementary. Same time, same start and end times are the same as last year. We will be going full days. And keep in mind, this is the plan right now, but could change. With the exception of the condensed schedule on those Wednesdays. All regular teachers are going to be virtual teachers. So what does that mean? Teachers will teach and live stream their classes at the same time. So all students are receiving the same education, but it's not giving an extra burden to the teacher. They don't have multiple preps. They're not doing in school and out of school work, or virtual or remote and in school. It's going to be the same. We have ordered equipment, or we're working to get the equipment that will allow our teachers to do that.
Yeah, one thing with that I've noticed in my job is a lot of times in professional you have a group of folks in a room, and then you have folks that are remote. And I oftentimes at headquarters was the one that was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
What I recognized when everybody went remote and everybody was in the same level of engagement, that it was more of an equal engagement.
Mm-hmm.
There was more consideration for the people that were remote, because we were all in the same boat. And I'm concerned that with those days when you are remote, I'm certain there's techniques to teach because it's not just a hybrid with regards to it's a hybrid classroom. It's both in person and remote at the same time. So and I suspect it's not a lot of different things that can be done, but as far as how the instructor, teacher can accommodate and make sure that because if you're in person, you can recognize when somebody might be not getting it, right? You have a number of different cues. And Stephanie and others might be able to jump in and know a lot more about this than I do, but I just want to make sure that we're putting our teachers in a position to where they can be successful and they understand the techniques and tools of how to do that.
Yes, and this brings up the next point. All lessons, while they're being live streamed, will also be recorded. So those students at home who may have an issue paying attention or may be be sick that day and not be able to watch. They'll be recorded so students can go back and review that recording and watch it again if they need to. For each course or subject, this is coming from state mandate now. Teachers must teach live at least 15 to 45 minutes. Now that's hard. If you're a teacher, you're probably not going to be lecturing for 45 minutes, so at least that 15. Then students may stay online after that live teaching period, or they can log off and work on their coursework until the next class starts. Time requirements are from KSDE. Students are going to follow the same school schedule every day, whether they're at home or at school. So even if I'm at home learning remotely, I'm still in math class at 8 o'clock, English at 9 o'clock, and so on. Specials and electives will have to adjust their teaching and learning to be as much like regular school as possible. We don't know what that looks like. I am not an expert PE teacher, and so I cannot dictate what the PE teachers will be doing. But we did discuss, and we have purchased some additional online subscriptions to things that will allow a band class to participate remote and on-site. The high school, high school has a block schedule. Well, for now, the block schedule will be put on hold, and they will be running on a Monday schedule every day for this purpose. Middle and high school students already take their Chromebooks home, so they should have a device at home already. Elementary students in grades 1 through 5 don't typically take those home, but we can make them available to take home if home devices are needed, and we'll work out a process for that. Kindergarten is a little different. They right now are 2-to-1, which means 2 children share 1 device. So it's not as easy as, okay, here's your device, take it home, but we will accommodate kindergarten if we need to, and we will work that out. And again, we're following CDC, KDHE, KSDE, and Leavenworth County Health Department recommendations throughout all of this. As far as the calendar goes, we're probably going to need to adjust our calendar. We know that all Leavenworth County schools are proposing to do this, so we are trying to be as similar as we can as possible. One of the reasons for that is we are in a special education cooperative with Baser Linwood. So we really, every year we try to mirror our calendar as much as possible according to our negotiated agreement and student contact mandates. So we will try to do that for this purpose because we share staff, we share students. We have students from Tonganoxie who go to Baser, we have Baser students who come to Tonganoxie for services. So we really have to be as consistent as possible with our calendars. So as far as that goes, we've looked at revising our calendar. Now, we have not run this through our calendar committee, so these are just ideas at this point. So we are looking at starting later and ending later, but keeping similar dates with Leavenworth County Schools for consistency. We're going to meet with the calendar committee and administration. Teacher contract days and times, student days and times, work days, professional development days will be similar in number to last year. So we're trying to keep those as similar as possible. Start date, we are looking at shifting to bring in our staff members on a later date. So we are looking at, like, for example, August 21st instead of August 13th. So we're moving those down or proposing to.
What we just handed out was our approved calendar.
Yes, so that is not
It
reflecting
doesn't show,
these
it doesn't
changes.
show the adjustments.
We
We have
are-
to go through the calendar. to
Yes.
get through some-
We are planning to front load all of our professional development. What that means is we're moving all of our PD days that we had scattered through the year up to the front of the school year so that we can have professional development on all of these things. How do we do virtual school correctly? How do we use these programs? How do we use this new technology? That would mean 6 days up front in August for all staff, and then 8 for new staff. New teachers have 2 extra days. The
Good.
first day, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, if we needed, is it possible to negotiate another day or something? I know that comes at a price, but.
At this point, according to what's written in the negotiated agreement, we would follow it. But if we had to add extra days for some reason, we would have to pay staff members individually for those
To
days.
extend the contract.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
But we feel like we have some flexibility.
Yes. One example, we are adopting new social studies materials, and staff will need training on that. Well, nobody's really thinking about how do I do social studies right now. They're really focused on how do I survive in this environment, how do I use my technology. So we are booking social studies training for those folks at a different day in August, and we are paying those teachers extra. Those are virtual 2-hour trainings. So we're not gonna use up our district PD days for that and have them.
For all that front-loaded PD, does Greenbush or whomever have the resources that we need for that online stuff, or do we need to?
They do. And we have Gary Richmond, who is our technology integration specialist. So he's key in helping through all this process as well.
I certainly think that if there were any specialists that we could bring in to help with that PD, that would be money well spent.
Yes, and we are working with our administrative team on the specifics of those days. We don't have them quite yet. So in this proposal, also the first day for students then would be moved approximately 2 weeks later. So for example, we would start with most of the elementary 6th grade and 9th grade on September 3rd, and then everyone else on September 8th.
Which is in line with Leavenworth County Schools.
Yes. The last day for school then, because we've moved the first day, we will push the last day of school back approximately 1 week to May 28th. For seniors, it would be May 21st. And again, those are proposals, so don't set that in stone right now with your calendars.
So what's the timeline and process to do the calendar committee and get the board approval? Like, is that a week, 2 weeks?
We can meet with the calendar committee as soon as they
We
can come
want
in.
it as
or we
quickly
can do
as
virtually.
possible.
Yes, we plan to do that as soon as possible so that we can let parents know, because they need to know. We all need to plan when our days back are.
When we make those adjustments and move the PE, we'll still have parent-teacher conferences and stuff. I mean, I know
Yes.
that there's some days built in there when we have those, but they'll still have that.
This
Parents
proposal-
contact with the teachers, I
Yes.
mean, that's your intent anyway.
Yes, this proposal that I've worked on is just relocating the first and last days, moving PD, but it's keeping parent-teacher conferences. Now, those might be virtual, I don't know yet. It's keeping holidays, most of those things. But that, I mean, the calendar itself, when it comes out, will be public, so that will all be defined very soon. The survey, let's talk about that. All right, the purpose of the survey, and it was poorly worded on my part. Honestly, right this minute, we were just trying to get an idea of which students might be on-site or hybrid versus remote, because we know there are some students who are medically fragile or who have family members who are medically fragile, and they really need a remote environment. We are just trying to determine approximately at this time how many would be remote versus how many would be on-site or hybrid. That would just help us plan our hybrid model. For example, if we had 50% of students want remote only, then we know we could just go ahead and start school with everybody with the other 50%, because it would be half the number of students and we could socially distance. Just to gather some ideas for that. That could help things, help planning and help us change things. Parents at any time, I know that the survey said you need to decide, here's your deal, and that was poorly worded on my part. But my message to folks is parents can change the type of learning on-site versus remote anytime until after school starts. Now, once we're in school mode and we have started school, we really need to stick with that, because I cannot imagine a flood of remote students all trying to come back at the same time. It's just not possible. Once school starts, groups should stay put that entire fall semester. So group A stays put. Now, there will be some situations where we have to make exceptions. That's just
Case
the way,
by case.
yeah, case by case. But that's the way we're looking at it. Now, if we need to start over and do a brand new survey, we will certainly do that. We can shut off the other one, start over with a brand new survey to determine, because folks really may want to change their answer right now, or they may not have completed it, or what have you. I will say also that IEPs, 504s, that is going to be done by law. We have to abide by our IEPs, our 504 plans. If a student on an IEP must have remote learning, we will honor their IEP and in the best way that we can. Now, our special education department will handle that. So I want to say that whatever you choose, on-site, hybrid, remote, whatever it is, we will honor the IEP and 504 and work within that. A few additional items that I just put down there for clarification. We're planning, all these plans are so that we can move seamlessly between everybody's at school to on-site hybrid to remote learning and be seamless with it so that we're able to do that by putting our plans together. We will adjust as needed based on the mandates, the recommendations, et cetera, from the state of Kansas, KDHE, KSDE, Leavenworth County Health Department, governor, whatever the case may be, we will be able to adjust. And I think our theme for this year is really going to be pivot. If you're a Friends fan, you understand pivot and what that means, but that's really going to have to be our theme, pivot and be flexible. I know you have a lot of questions. I hope that this has provided some clarification for you, and we'll be making changes as we go and putting that out to parents.
So athletics, if you move that calendar, I know that changes how we
Okay.
do things.
That's
Is that
Keisha.
gonna shift? Do we just start at that point?
You know,
How's that gonna
Yeah,
work?
Mark might help me a little bit on this. Keisha, we received information from Keisha yesterday is the last that I saw,
Yeah.
as far as what that looks like. And I filled out a survey this morning asking school districts what moving back to August, whatever, or not August, September 8th would look like for us. And so they're putting those results together, but what else from activities have you heard? I don't have.
Yeah, I saw a ruling yesterday from Keisha that said, if parents choose 100% online, then they will be allowed to participate in Keisha activities. I think there's a lot of districts out there that are struggling with that right now, because the thought process of, I don't want to risk my child going to school, well, then you probably shouldn't risk them participating in extracurricular activities, and that's common sense. However, I think there's some legalities that Keisha has recognized, and their stance changed. So I'm reaching out to our league principals and seeing how they feel, and how they feel today, because it's pretty fresh, might be different than how they're, after they consult with their superintendents and school boards, how they feel afterwards.
It just seems like a lot of school districts are caught in a vice
Yeah.
what they're going to do.
If a
Because
parent-
everybody's asking, but
And
there's
it
no clear
matters
cutting.
greatly, because if a parent says, well, I want my kid involved in activities, and so they feel like they're forced to go to school, it changes the numbers that school buildings will be handled. So, and that's a decision that we need to make pretty quick, because our parents, I've gotten a lot of questions from our parents on that, and from our coaches.
I mean, you're meaning all activities. We're not just saying sports. We're saying
Activities.
if
All
they're
activities.
all activities across
Debate,
band,
band.
everything. So, I mean, even with the hybrid, kids are, I guess the intent is to keep them social distance and space and safe. So half the kids are in part of the time, but then you're going to have athletics after that, and you're going to be pulling kids from all different pools of kids. So, how's that going to be?
Sure. If we find ourselves in a hybrid, and it's time for practice at 3:30, everybody shows up. Whether it's your day to be at home or at school.
They do all wear masks.
Oh.
Well, they don't.
Well-
The reports. I know my child does, but according
I've
to her,
watched it,
but
yeah.
the reports I get,
I'm
they don't.
just saying.
They don't. And Mark's heard from him a few times that we just need to follow whatever our rules are. We just follow them. But I wasn't meaning to go down that path. It seems. They're already kind of getting together, and there hasn't been
I think
issues. I'm just theoretically saying.
I think it's an incredibly slippery slope, though. To force something less than full-time going to school, force all this stuff, but then say at 3:30, everybody can drink out of the same water fountain on the football field. It's a really slippery slope.
Keisha did come out with their guidelines, and they are very, very specific in some areas, exactly how many tennis balls you have to have, and you know, specific masks and water bottles and distance. I haven't even read through a portion of it, but our athletic directors and our coaches are going to be very busy trying to determine all that, because they're trying to go under the same guidelines that we are in the classrooms too, and fit it to athletics and activities.
And we don't want to violate any rule. One of the things that I think Keisha was thinking about was that we have homeschool kids, and they participate in extracurricular activities in the district that they live in. And so to exclude a child is something that no one takes lightly, and I think that's driving a little bit of that decision.
So as a parent, though, you can decide, I mean, as a parent of 4 children, I have to make a decision with my husband whether I will allow my child to go to school full time, or whether I will allow my child to go to school 2 days a week and be home 3, or will I, you know, or allow them only to be online. So that same decision-making process in each household has to be driven by the parents. If I want to allow my child to participate, if there's a reason that they have to be online schooled because of other scenarios, because they have to watch a younger sibling, or I mean, I can only imagine there's a scenarios like I have no
I
idea.
agree with that, but
if,
by commingling those cohorts at the end of the day in a practice, have we not thrown away what we did all day in school? So I agree with you, it's a parental decision, but haven't we also put a bunch of other kids at risk? I don't know what we're gonna decide.
I think we're gonna get a lot more definition from Keisha in the next 10 days. I really do. They're struggling. They had an executive board meeting yesterday, they didn't decide anything. They deferred it. And so that's where we're at.
I just don't wanna, I agree with Kaya with regards to leaving it to the parents. If there's recommendations coming down, we're gonna be busy enough trying to figure out how to implement those recommendations, rather than figuring out how to, if we want to pick and choose which ones we want to deviate from. That's my concern. We're gonna be.
I agree with what you're saying, but I'm saying we commingle the AV groups at practice. Now we've commingled those kids at school that weren't at practice because they were commingled in the afternoon. So
And
we're
I think
not just making the decision for our kids. We are making some decisions that impact other people's kids too. And I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't do sports. I think it's huge. I think it's part of the reason some of these kids are coming to school. But those are all factors.
Yeah, my preference would be to take that to Keisha and make sure that's a consideration and with the resources they have, and see how they factor that, because I think that's everybody's going to be marking that.
Yeah, keep in mind that I think it's possible that Keisha is saying that you can do it. That doesn't mean that we have to do that. So we will get clarification on that. Because I agree with Justin that if you're commingling at one, you might as well commingle at both.
Well, you got, I mean, I wasn't even thinking of this, but Karen messaged in, and you got, middle school would be a prime example. If those kids can't drive, so that, I mean, the coaches, you know, they can't get, unless a parent can bring them, they can't get here. So, I mean, or you got freshmen that are gonna be subject to things. I mean, it's way in the weeds. It's something that has to be worked out, but obviously there's gotta be flexible. I think we've expressed with even the math stuff, that if kids don't show up to the workouts and the things, they shouldn't be reprimanded for not being there because for safety precautions so far from their folks or whatever. But, and it's very complicated.
It is, and whatever we decide, it's gonna be wrong, I'll just tell you, because I don't think there's any right answer to any of this, because we just don't know. We are not COVID experts, we're doing the best we can, we are education experts, and that's what we're dealing with.
Lauren, when we talked earlier, there was some question about whether on the hybrid schedule, the kids that were not in class, would they get full credit for that time that they were home, and how would that play into?
There was some clarification on that today, and that's the intent.
Yes,
Yes.
and that's talked about in the direction about the hours and the time.
Okay.
in class and the 15 minutes that they have to be engaged and checked in and then working.
Yeah.
That's
That
how.
question's been asked a lot.
Yes, we had the same concern.
Yeah.
Tanya, I had a question about the switch time. You said that they could switch if I chose hybrid and then I wanted to switch to all online, I could do it up until the beginning of school. But then I thought the reason that we were doing a survey was because we wanted to know how many we're doing each. So is it, I mean, is that, do you know where I'm going with that?
Yes, and I didn't state that clearly in the survey, that right now we were just trying to get an idea and that we could switch up until school starts. I did not state that in that survey, so if we need to
Right.
redo, we certainly can.
But what I'm saying is, if the reason you want to know what they're doing is so that, I mean, what you said was, I would like to know the percentages so that we can know if 50% are online, then we could bring everybody else back, right?
Mhm.
So let's say that scenario goes down the path. So we do that. So 50% are home online, 50% go back to school, but then if they can switch their opinion, like you can switch your plan up until the day school starts, and then, I mean, maybe it's not likely, like maybe it's talking about, the guy jumping on one foot, like maybe this is crazy, but it was something that I thought when you said it, that if they can switch until that date, like maybe that date needs to be earlier, because will that change things if all of a sudden, 20% more kids
It
decide, you know what, I want to go to school too.
Potentially could,
And-
yes.
So maybe that date can't be the beginning of school. Like maybe your change date has to be earlier. I don't know.
It
I'm
could
just
be, but I also
asking.
don't want to punish somebody who, like the day before, really desperately needs to make that change. And I don't know, we're between a rock
My
and a hard
assumption
place.
would be that more people, some drastic change in the status of COVID would be what would drive someone's change to go hybrid versus virtual. And there would be a higher likelihood that people would switch from hybrid to virtual than the other way, just based on spikes. So my assumption, and I think your question's great, but my assumption would be more people would transition to virtual than to in school, but.
Yeah, I appreciate what we're trying to do here is to gauge the interest in full virtual. Based upon what I've heard tonight, I do think that the survey needs to be redone and it can be much shorter.
Mhm.
So that it clearly says, to support our planning process, we're trying to gauge the interest of people going full online, independent of what a hybrid might look like. So based upon your current situation and the information you have available to you today, which includes, high-risk people, whether it be the student or the family, how likely would you be to do a full online and have a 5 scale, not at all likely, all the way up to very likely. So we can not only gauge, it's not a yes or no, we can gauge interest and how strong that interest is. And I think it can be a much shorter survey, and you can say that this doesn't commit you to anything with regards to it. It's purely a planning process as part of our appreciate
That
your
was-
patience and your understanding.
That was one of the biggest misunderstandings.
Mhm.
And that's on us.
That's hindsight. The whole purpose of the whole yes/no piece in there that listed some things was to just provide more information, like, if I'm really thinking about remote learning, do I understand what this means? And do I understand it's not gonna be like the spring where, your grade's not gonna change and you can, it's all gonna be just watch a video, maybe do an assignment, it was just to provide more of, there's gonna be a different structure and information, but it was poorly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because right now people only know what they've experienced, and it could be just a 15 to 30 minute video exchange with the teacher once a week, and that is not.
Well, and
exactly
case
right.
in point, we had a high school student stop in to the district office and say, hey, I'm really are you guys gonna offer that distance learning, like we did in the spring? Cause that was really cool for me, I could do my work and then sleep in and I really want people to understand it's gonna be different. It's not gonna be like it was.
So to that point, on the full virtual, so we have said 6.5 hours daily, and then we talked about the amount of direct instruction on a couple of subjects. We don't talk about the amount of direct instruction on other subjects. is it an appropriate expectation that someone that signed up for full distance would have 6.5 hours in front of a teacher every day? Or is it something less than that?
It would be more of an average, probably, realistically. I mean, the state
that's fine,
is
but
requiring us to.
6.5 hours on average a day.
Yes,
Okay.
But there may be days where you have 15 minutes of instruction and then you're working on a project-based learning. And then there may be another day where you have to listen to this lecture for 45 minutes, you know, and it's based on age too and what you're working on. It could be different. I don't wanna say every single day you have to log this number of hours and, you know, more of an average, but yes, we are responsible for submitting the logs.
I have some questions about your vision on how that teacher is going to be able to teach virtually and in the classroom. So is there technology, like a couple questions I have, is there technology that allows the student virtually to be able to be engaged enough, or are they just listening and maybe they see what's happening on the Promethean board? Or how does a teacher know if a kid online has a question? Or so are there technology pieces? And then my other question is on training. I can't think of any schools ever, maybe there are some, that where a teacher actually teaches online and in person at the exact same time. There are virtual teachers and there are in-person teachers.
Right.
And so who's gonna be able to provide that PD that actually gives teachers a good understanding of how to manage both? Because that, especially as you go into the lower elementary, I don't know how a teacher will be able to manage unless there's a parent sitting with that child or an older sibling being able to help that child facilitate that.
Yes. Well, this is a new frontier for us, and you know, a few weeks ago we were panicking, thinking, how do we do this? You know, how do we do remote learning? And you know, can we do like in the spring where we recorded a video, and then we're like, we want the kids in school and at home to experience the same education, to not have it be lessened because you're remote, you know. So the best thing we came up with was, okay, live stream with recording. So how does that work? We talked to Forrest, he's our technology director. How does this work? So Forrest had been researching, and he hasn't had a whole lot of time to pull this together, but God bless him, he's come up with this. Our teachers already have a laptop in their room. We're looking at bringing in an upgraded model Chromebook, not the student Chromebook. It's a more expensive model that's more robust. Where you can have the Chromebook, there would be not an Elmo digital camera. No. Yes. And speakers, Bluetooth, so that the students at home hear you on a mic, so they can hear, you can hear the students, you have them on your screen with interactions as well. So teacher would have 2 screens. Now, PD on that, you know, we're gonna have to train how do you use the technology first of all, how do you teach that way. Gary Richmond actually has experience with that. When he was in Topeka 501, they had a model where they had something similar to that. It was called a swivel, an iPad on a swivel, and when you're teaching, it follows you. And so he has experience teaching in that format, and he's gonna be critical in helping our teachers learn that as well.
You know, given how challenging it was for this group here and trying to make sure we didn't have echoes and just I'm thinking about if half the classroom, especially in the elementary's on, I mean, how you're going.
Well, and I'm thinking like science, when you teach science, you've got a hands-on activity, well, it takes supplies. How do those kids at home get the same supplies as that you have at school? Or like how are you gonna manage all of that? That takes a lot of skill to be able to manage all of those pieces, doing both in person and online at the same time.
So, I mean, well, what you're saying there is like, I think that's where a lot of people are concerned about is how is this actually going to work? And how am I going to be in a position to be able to accommodate this as a parent or a head of household or whatever? That we have got to get in front of the communication piece and start to provide this and say, and explain that we get that is a challenge. Here is how we're handling that. And this is our time frame to accommodate the start of school on this date. So that people know at least we're aware of those challenges and we're working on it. I truly believe that a vast majority of people will through online, or through Facebook, or social media, or through a couple different channels. We have to get in front of this communications piece to let people know where they're at. There's been a lot of good work out here, and nobody knows about it. Or that other things that we're working on, or what, like, you know, hey, it's based upon cases. It will not be the decision of the district to do it. It will be dictated. Here's how that works, and
I think another thing is, I mean, maybe you have this scheduled, but doing test runs where there's teachers, before you even do your, teacher education piece on it, or professional development. I mean, I think that there's a lot of technology even that I bought for our house. I'm like, oh, this is great, perfect, buy it, whatever, and then you get it and it doesn't work like you think it's gonna work. So, I mean, setting up a few teachers in classrooms and having kids participate at home and running through that. But I think that needs to be done before you communicate with the parents. Like, I don't think that you can say to the parents, this is what we're going to do, without doing that. Because what if that doesn't work?
Well, even, I was just sitting here thinking, we can't run 2 Zoom meetings at our house at the same time based on the internet that we have. If you're expecting a family of 2 or 3 kids all to be online with a video going on at the same time, it may not be possible for that family to be able to do that.
I think that's another reason why the recording thing is a big deal. Not that that's optimal, but at least
Yeah,
it's
and we have to be flexible and know that, due to your family situation, for this day, you're gonna have to watch afterwards and your sibling is checked in live and,
On the survey, there was some notice about, if you needed a Wi-Fi hotspot. I know you talked about devices in here. Are we really prepared for that, if that's a
yes,
thing?
we, Sprint has a great program where they have given us hotspots for us to distribute. It used to be just high school, and now the program's expanded K-12. So we are able to provide as many of those as we are able.
How many, Forrest? I'm not even
How
sure.
many we have now?
Okay, 50,
And we can get more as we need them, okay? And then, we have Wi-Fi that stretches out to some of portions of our parking lot. The library has Wi-Fi. I know that's not ideal. And some of our teachers had to teach that way. This spring, they had to drive and sit in the parking lot. That was awful. We have just recently gotten good Wi-Fi, so I can totally empathize with spotty and super slow Wi-Fi.
I think a lot of it's gonna be up to the teachers too, to help with managing, some of those questions that you have.
What I don't want to do,
It could be, it could fall back on the recordings and not showing 3 videos at one time. It's impossible. Parents know that.
I don't want to just say, we're just going to give you paper packets
Right.
if you don't have.
Right.
We will work with families and try to figure out a solution to that, but I don't think just paper packets is a good solution to remote learning.
I do not want to say we have Wi-Fi in our parking lot for 6.5 hours.
It's not a good answer.
No, well, I mean, in December snowstorm, I mean, what do you, more when it's bad weather?
Well, I have to admit, it was thrown out there.
There's so much, so
I
much.
I just want to say,
all kinds of
like,
ideas.
I understand it's around there, yes, but I just want to,
Yeah.
this is, we are, there's a lot of eyes on us right now. I just want to make sure that we're very, like Justin has said, very clear about.
Mark and Mark are back here. Mark, Farrar, do you feel like your teachers are in a better position now than they were, let's say, before the pandemic? Because I know you've talked a lot about how you're going to try to get our teachers to increase the amount of rigor and the accountability piece. I mean,
we're
it's a huge part.
much better place right now, primarily because it's our expectation to meet with kids every day, every period. They have to be accountable to a schedule and a time. So we have school. It's our intention to have school every day. And with Forrest's help and improving our technology, it's going to create a more interactive online environment, and that's going to be just huge.
Mark Altman, what will be your challenges with the younger kids? I mean, because it's not the same as high school.
I think the challenge is going to be getting kids to engage at home. It's going to be the biggest thing, just as we saw last spring. I mean, the kids that were engaged, I think, got some good education, and we did a good job with those. It's just that how we keep them engaged at home and hold them accountable. I think our teachers will do great with the new technology, and our building does a really good job of getting on board with stuff, and they're willing to work and try new things. So I think that's going to go well. And we talked at our last DLT meeting that this is something we can see being useful past COVID. You know, just if streaming and uploading your lessons, if the kid's absent for whatever reason, they can still check in and get that instruction. If we can't have a kid in the ISS room, says sitting there missing out on instruction, they can view it online. So it's something that's going to be beneficial to us past COVID. You know, I think our staff realizes that, and they're kind of excited about it.
But wasn't there some, at least some of the teachers have taken some training for online?
Shelley Hunter and Deb Holloway both did, I don't know, they've been going to K-State.
I think
a
they've
lot
had
this
12
summer.
credit hours over the summer
Yeah.
to get this remote teaching training.
Yeah, so we'll be leaning on them pretty heavily to train the rest of the staff, probably not just in our building, but probably in the district to help people do a better job of teaching remotely.
But I think Stephanie's comments are very real. I mean, we got teachers who, it's a big curve for them, no doubt about it.
It's not even just a big curve, it's something that isn't really done very commonly. It's not even a practice that's ever considered like a good practice, really, because you don't, if it was, it would have been used a lot more. So it would be interesting to see how we make that work.
I think the other thing is intervening quickly if there's any behavioral issues or social emotional issues, because, you know, if you're a teacher and you're trying to keep track of 10 kids in the class and 10 kids online, and you've got a troublemaker or a social emotional issue on either side, the live or the online, I mean, I'm sure it's terribly distracting in a normal situation, and it's got to be even more so. So I'm assuming that we've got to lean heavily on administrative teams and others to, you know, pretty quickly intervene in those situations, because the teacher's just not going to have time to mess with it.
Is there a tracking system? I mean, I guess I have two tracking questions. So one is, you know, because we're coming off of a situation where kids were at home learning, and then, you know, like how do we know, can you start, like if I have a child entering 5th grade, how do I know that, you know, what they didn't fall behind because, right, so like how are we gauging where we're starting the year off? And then also in the tracking that goes back to, you know, the new tools and technology we're using, what is the scenario, or what is the way you're tracking that to see if it's actually working? So if, you know, you're a month into this, how do you know how the students feel, and how, I mean, just, you know, of our 4 kids, there are 2 kids that thought that they learned the same, they just had less practice at what they learned. And then I have one child who will tell you that she learned absolutely nothing, and if she has to do that again, she's like, there's no possible way that she will, I mean, she just won't. Like there's no possible way that she could possibly learn or go back to the learning how we had to. So, because she didn't, you know, she had anxiety about it. Like it was everything that is horrible. So, how do you communicate with those students and find out how they're doing, and whether they feel like they're learning, and whether the teacher feels like their environment that they're teaching is working? Like, what's the tracking system for that?
Yeah, there's got to be conversations with teachers and students, and that can happen in a variety of ways. You know, if you have groups of students that come in, we have designated times in each building where it's like homeroom or warrior time or meeting time, you know, so that you can talk openly about those things. But then there's also the opportunities for surveys or one-on-one talking, and our teachers and our administrators do a good job of that anyway. As far as tracking academically, you know, we've got systems built into place, tools and things already where we can gauge what students have learned, what they know. Formative assessments, we've got mini map assessments, we have map growth. You know, we have a lot of those things already into place, but we have also purchased something called Goformative, and it is a tool that has a lot of things built into it already, but it also gives teachers the ability to create those formatives, those mini formatives that see what you know in real time. We have a lot of training to do on that, but that's something that we'll be easing in as the year starts. So.
And what I would add is just through my conversations with the administrative team, the social emotional piece is huge. And I think you're going to see, you know, us talk a lot more about that. How our counselors and administrators, teachers talk to those kids more on a one-to-one basis. You're going to have to just to find out how they're doing. I mean, that sounds kind of superficial.
But that's not, there's not enough counselors to talk one-on-one with the amount of students that we have.
I think we're just going to make it an emphasis. I mean, it's not going to be perfect.
Well, and during the spring too, there were some things that came up, and I had the unique view of watching my kids do the online learning, and my husband was teaching in it, and then I was administrator. So I had the opportunity to see when my husband was concerned about a student, hey, this student hasn't checked in, I haven't heard from them, I've tried multiple times to contact them, their parents. Then he would contact administration and counselors, and they would reach out. There were a lot of times that there were some things we had to intervene on because of certain situations. So teachers are really good anyway about kind of recognizing those things, what's going on, is something bothering you. I feel like we have things built in. Now, are we going to be able to meet one-on-one with students all the time? No, but we have some things already built into place that work really well.
It's just a topic that we've really discussed and know that we have to emphasize. Because those kids miss being around other kids, the social piece. And so.
What's the logistics for the, so if, you know, all of us around this table are third grade teachers, are two teachers teaching full virtual and the rest of us are teaching hybrid? Or is the fully virtual just as part of, so a teacher would really have three groups of students. You'd have an A hybrid cohort, a B hybrid cohort, and full virtual all in the same room, is that right?
Yes, but they would realistically all be on at the same time. Or
Yeah, it's the same video stream, it's just going to,
yeah.
might be going to B group and, well, I think that's your.
Yeah, so a third grade teacher might have an A cohort in the classroom, a B cohort at home that day, and almost a C cohort that are fully virtual, they're at home every day.
Would that depend on the number of kids you have virtual? I mean, if you had a full, I would assume you could teach remotely more, maybe not more kids than we normally have. Would you just assign one teacher becomes
Well, we've thought
virtual?
about that. Actually, we thought about just, say at the elementary level, for example, having one teacher at each grade level be the virtual. But then, if we had to seamlessly move to all remote learning, then is that teacher then responsible for all the people in the grade level, or do then we divvy them up and, well, maybe this is my remote teacher, this is my on-site, and it was really hard to
I can see
gauge.
that if you had to pivot to full virtual for everybody, that makes sense now. So I gotta think it causes some consternation as to, you know, if you got 7 teachers, which one gets to be the virtual teacher?
Okay,
I
kind
think
of a-
you almost need the virtual, somebody designated to be the virtual teacher. I don't know how you'll pull off, as somebody who actually teaches both virtual and in the classroom, I do virtual separate from my classroom work, and they work separately. They're not watching, and so I'm able to focus a period of time on virtual, and I'm able to focus a period of time on the classroom. And
Yes. Now, Baser's unique because they have a virtual school.
Right.
We do not have a virtual school. We have a remote learning environment that we're going to be working with, but we don't have a virtual school. And they have different rules, different things that they're obligated to do as part of that virtual school that we don't in the normal school environment. So, I mean, it is a little bit different. 'Cause you have different preps and different things to do and prepare for. Whereas with this, we're trying to keep everybody as much the same as possible, getting the same education.
I think you'd still do that if you did have a designated virtual teacher, because they're all communicating together. All those teachers should be pacing about the same place. And so if you had to go all virtual, wouldn't they just keep the virtual kids they already had and everybody else keep their classroom, whatever kids were in their AV classroom, and take those virtually?
Good, I mean, we've
Yeah,
talked
something
about
to think
that.
But I agree where you're, I have some of the same concern you have, Stephanie, because the concern I have is if nobody has really done that before, there's probably a reason, or it hasn't been done very much. And like I said, when I've had a group of people in a room and then remote, like, how do you raise your hand when you're remote? If everybody's remote, you're all on the same equal footing. And I'm really worried about the full-time online. Now, to your point, if we have a survey and we understand how many people that actually is, that goes into the planning of what your solution might be.
And you could even have, some teachers might not like this, but even if you had a virtual class, you could almost have more people in that virtual class, a little bit greater class size than the teachers that actually were in person with the kids, because you're not managing, you shouldn't be managing as many behaviors in the classroom virtually, hopefully not, if the parents are there also involved.
But
in
now I
the
have to grade
supervision.
60 documents and you only have to grade 20 and.
Well, and virtually though, a lot of times you're creating those assessments online and those kids are taking those assessments online, where in the classroom, not always is that happening. So, but, something to think about.
Yes, sure. We have a lot to think about and
Okay.
plan for and do.
So to that end, when we think about a revised survey, we think about additional information on what hybrid and virtual mean to parents. We think about, we've got a board meeting on Monday. What's the logistics over the next 5 to 15 days to work through all those things?
Well,
You're asking, we're in high speed.
I mean, it seems like we need to be as flexible to, I can't see them getting a lot of these things answered. I think maybe in my mind that, are we gonna extend the school day out in the calendar? Can be a pretty quick, seems like a reasonably quick turnaround. Some of the survey, that's gonna take a little bit to get some parents on that, but
The results might be, but the data to be able to take the survey in terms of some of this stuff.
well,
We can put that together.
This could be put together out pretty quick, I think, after this meeting tonight.
I would like to say we could get this calendar put together before Monday night. I mean, that's gonna be a push. I mean, and it just is.
Did we put that, when we talked about a Monday night meeting, but we didn't post the agenda for a special meeting, but I mean, we can waive the notice and call a meeting, I guess, whenever they're available, but there's not one set, so I guess I kind of need from them, if we want to do it with the 3-day notice or whatever, it probably would be Tuesday, otherwise we could call it at a minute, anytime we can get together.
We need to have a lot, I mean, we've done a lot of special meetings in the past, and this is something to me, is like, we need to schedule something and just keep tracking through it, and, cause, and providing input and feedback, or even direction, or, whatever it is, to me, I mean,
I guess maybe what would help me, for Lauren and Tanya, if we could see a timeline that was, by tomorrow, we send out details on the hybrid schedule and the virtual schedule, and by Tuesday, we're ready to talk about the calendar.
Yeah.
Some sort of a timeline, and I think we can be pretty transparent with the timeline too.
Yes.
It gives everybody some confidence, and I'm like Drew, if we need to meet every night, well, it doesn't sound fun, if we need to do it, we need to do it.
Well, I guess I would probably lean at this point to probably say, we set something up maybe for Tuesday, unless they have something,
yeah.
unless they can pull something together faster than Monday.
But we need to be honest with ourselves with that plan. It can't be hey, we're just gonna work really hard and we hope we're gonna get, we need to say, here's what we think we did, here's the assumptions that are made. This assumes these things happen here, and if those things don't happen, we can't meet this. We have to be clear with regards to what the variables are in that, because I understand it's a fluid environment, right? Obviously, you know, if there's another executive order come out, who knows? I mean, it's all bets are off. But we have to be, very honest with ourselves, with our ability, with the resources we have to be able to get things done, so that we aren't inserting our own volatility into it. Like, you know, that things are changing because we can't follow,
And again, I think for the purpose of context, to be able to do a survey, I don't think we need to think through. There's a bunch of details that matter, but they don't matter for that survey. And I think if we can get, you know, here's the 10 bullet points that highlight what hybrid means. Here's the 10 bullet points that highlight what virtual means. Here's the survey. I mean, there's 100 points of detail behind that matter, but they don't matter in the next 3 days.
One other question I have is about busing of kids. There's probably gonna be parents that make the determination that they don't want their
Right.
kids riding on a bus. They may decide they want them in the classroom, but not on the bus.
Right.
Is that a question that we need to add to be able to plan?
You know, we thought about that. I know Baser added that one to their survey. That's part of our enrollment anyway. So when bus drivers get that information, they begin calling parents. But if parents at any time say, you know, I signed up for bus service and enrollment, but I don't want to do that now, then we would need to know that. And that would be on a case-by-case basis, I guess. I don't know that we would capture what we needed in a survey.
Yeah. Did you look at what the state came out with their transportation recommendations? It's in there. It's on. I mean, it's on page 1033. But basically, it's kind of going back to practice. We're putting all these kids together on one bus. Now they may be different cohorts, obviously, but it's like, oh my gosh, you know, they want kids from same families to sit together. And when you get on the bus, everybody goes to the back of the bus and works your way forward. It's going to be a challenge. But I don't know if that's going to help answer your questions, but it's addressed in here.
Well, I think her point was just, yes or
Well, just
no.
for
If we're doing a
planning.
survey, yes or no only.
Yeah, I
And
get
like,
it.
maybe you won't need as many bus routes. Maybe, you know, like, maybe you will. Maybe you'll be able to distance those kids on the buses.
I know, yeah.
I was kind of thinking maybe that would be helpful in planning and knowing more about who plans to ride the bus. But if you feel like that's information,
I'm
that's better.
hoping through enrollment we get a lot of that answered.
Yeah, and then I hate for parents to check, yes, I want bus service, and think that they're signed up for it when they haven't filled out the request on enrollment. So many different
I
factors
get
we
where
need
you're
to think through with that.
I don't know what the rules are in terms of what the different teachers can teach and what their contracts say, but would there be any reason to pull back on some of the specials and have some of the specials teachers teach a second grade class or something so that you can divvy the kids up more widely? Or
Teacher licensures are very different.
and so it may have been a really stupid
I was
question.
just watching Stephanie's face.
Well, I mean,
It's not recommended.
I may have
And that's fine.
K-9 license, but I've been teaching PE for 20 years, and if you asked me to take second grade, I would panic and quit. But there are people who are maybe just licensed for art,
No, I'll get
teaching
that.
art. Yeah,
Not,
I mean,
not applicable, just a question.
yeah, it's a good question. Lots of answers to that, though.
No, that's fair, that's fair.
I'm sorry, Chris texted me a question. He's having trouble hearing, but he kind of wanted to know, I mean, I guess we're going to do the staff survey. I mean, what are any thoughts if we have teachers that were unable to come in and teach? I mean, what we think we're going to.
There's some legal ramifications behind that we need addressed with KASB. So, you know, ADA compliance would fall under that, and, you know, or is it just that I don't want to come back, or?
And Audra and I visited about this, and it could be a case-by-case basis, and I think that's what we have to look at.
I mean, I know there's a lot of HR laws. So
Yeah.
we just gotta do what we have to do the right way.
I have a question. So if we're gonna send out a new survey, I think that it needs to be defined clearly what the definition of each option is. So I sent some of you that video that I found online, and then you had found a chart that was very clear. So personally, I would do both, because I don't think it's hard to do either of them, and I think that people understand and digest the information differently. So what I think, or I guess I'm throwing it out there, as an idea, but it might be a good thought to think about producing those two documents and sending them with the survey, so that so as a parent, when you get the information, you can watch the video and you can have a very clear viewpoint of, like, this is what my child's day looks like, when they go to school hybrid. This is what my child's day looks like when they go to online. But I also think we need to be very clear when we're talking about the online school that, because when we're talking through this, we're saying, it's very possible that online student, if they have any difficulties, might be watching it. It might not be interactive. It might be that they're watching a video of that class, because if they don't have good Wi-Fi in the country and they can't have multiple students, like if you have 4 kids at home and they're all trying to be online and they can't do that, then, it's possible that that's how they're learning, is they're watching this video. And it's also possible that they're not and they're online. But I just think we need to be very upfront and honest with people, so that when they're signing up for that option, they know. Because what will be very disappointing to parents is if you pick that option thinking that your child's going to wake up at 8:40 when math class starts on, log on, and it's all going to be interactive and online, and that's not happening. Like, that's not a capability. It doesn't work. So then you have your child, turn on the TV and say, "Oh, I'm going to watch it later." I think parents just need to know, like, this is the reality of all of these things, and they need to know that before they answer the survey, because otherwise it's not, especially if they have until the day of school to change their mind, because I change my mind a lot. So I don't know, like 50 times a day. But I just think.
I don't believe that.
Okay, 49.
I think so I think the more documentation, the video, I think all that would be great. But if we can get something out tomorrow, or it takes 2 weeks to create the document and the video, I think there's a big time element here too.
I kind of like the idea of the bullet pointed details.
There's just laws in here that people have talked to me about that would address their concerns, right?
Absolutely.
That, because in that, if they don't have that information, people are going to feel forced to make an alternative decision. That will be a different school, it will be virtual, something else. It will, because it will terrify them if they feel like, I don't know how I'm going to support this, or I don't know what it's going to look like. They'll be, and we gotta stay ahead of that, because I think there's progress being made. There's a lot of information that's coming from, state sources that we're implementing in, that's been thought through. We just gotta get ahead of the communication side of things and let people know how we're prioritizing things, how we're planning around it. The plan isn't done yet, finalized. It will change. There's no doubt about it. It will. And be able to communicate that, and that will help people out a lot.
I think on the survey too, if the sports part is not defined yet, I think you just need to let people know that. I think I think that you cannot eliminate that information, because that would make if your kids cannot play sports in the fall, it would, like, it changes, like, whether you want them to go into school or not, because it changes, like, if they do virtual school, you can travel and they can do virtual school if they don't have to be here at 3 o'clock for sports, right? So it's different. I mean, your decision is different for many people. So I think that needs to be included.
Yeah, we just need to know that, again, anything can change at any time. Keisha could come out after school starts and say, fall sports are canceled, period.
And I think we put big, red, bold caveats on all that stuff, and I think generally people have been pretty understanding of that too, so, but I think people get that.
I have kind of a totally different question, but what about lunch? We serve a lot of kids in the summertime with the free thing, given our demographics. We're already gonna have kids, we're forced to do the hybrid that are gonna be home. There's gonna be a lot of financial strain around, and
Yes.
I
There
guess
are-
the food situation.
There are clear regulations that student nutrition has to follow. It's not going to be like the spring, and it won't be like the summer. There are some things that are lined out in the KSDE navigating change, but there's also more information that Barb Smith, our student nutrition director, is just learning about. So that she will release that information as she gets it, and then we will include it in what we have as we get it. So if we find out that, you know what, we can't do any meals for remote students, then we need to let parents know that. But we have not been informed of very specific.
No, she just said the one program had ended, and
Yes.
that we're entering into a new program. She's yet to find out exactly what that looks like.
And that might be something to add into this.
'Cause I'm sure that'll come up.
It's just not, at this point unknown, or whatever the Q&As that we're developing. I kind of view this as kind of a Q&A document. You can add the questions with it or whatever. Are there more questions related to the restart plan that we've seen?
What is the plan on voting on the start date?
I'm hoping I want to visit with Tanya. And we need to contact the calendar committee tomorrow, get that lined up. And I'm guessing that we would like to have that set up on Monday. If we could actually have a special board meeting on Tuesday, I would like to get that out. And I think that's doable. So that's my goal, is that if we could move that back a day, that would certainly help us to the 28th instead of the 27th. That's the calendar.
I guess if it goes smoothly and fast by noon or something on Monday, and you're ready to make any kind of announcement, I kind of find that time frame a little, I don't see Monday at all as working.
Tuesday,
But I think we can announce, I can have Audra set a meeting tonight for Tuesday that meets the normal time frames, and we don't have to waive the notice requirement.
I think we can on the 28th at 6.
What about the timing to get out the revised survey and the bullet points?
That's where I needed it again.
Yes. We need a little time to put some things together and revise some things. So I don't want to say it's going to come out tomorrow, because it won't. The important thing for me was that the board has all of the information now that we have. So now I feel more comfortable in communicating everything else with the parents now. So we can put that together. I hope to have that information out. I don't want to bits and pieces it. So maybe wait till the calendar is approved, and then we can put out everything after Tuesday, or
Why don't we put on the agenda this calendar approval, and then also update on this plan?
And I can put out an update to all the community, that what our timeline looks like, our process might help a little bit. And I'll talk to Kanya tomorrow, see where, and Saturday, see where we're at on some of these changes.
On the virtual teaching, Stephanie was talking about having dedicated virtual teachers versus not doing that. I personally would like that to be investigated more. I would like to know, is a possibility, if you know, if the directive is that you have to have a dedicated virtual teacher in every grade, is that possible? And if it's not possible, why is it not possible? And I mean, I just feel like instead of just talking about it and then not answering the question of whether it's a reality or not.
If we have teachers who are high risk and are not comfortable coming in, they might be prime candidates for doing that. I don't know.
We have discussed that, and we can continue to discuss that with our administrative teams and our BLTs.
I just, it appears to me, just from what you're saying, and you have experience doing it, that it might be a better experience for the student, you know, too, on the other end. You know, not having a teacher that's distracted doing both, but having someone that's dedicated to, you know, I mean, I don't know. I've never taken or taught an online class. So
I think that might be easy at the
Elementary.
elementary level. Secondary level might be a challenge because you have
To find two chemistry
one seventh
teachers.
grade English teacher, one, you know, eighth grade social studies
Elementary.
teacher.
Elementary, I think, would definitely be needed more than middle
I agree,
school and
I
high
agree.
school.
Yeah.
But for sure, elementary, I can
Yeah.
see that being,
We definitely
much more
discussed
needed.
it.
Yes.
Okay.
We can
So-
revisit and revise as we need to. If it makes more sense to go back to that, we certainly can.
So the other question is on, you know, we've had scenarios before where we start school and students don't have concrete schedules set, you know, like where they don't, you know, they, and for example, I'll say like with this whole, the COVID, I know that my two older kids they had mandatory reading during the summer that they had to do for a class that they were entering in high school. But my daughter that now should be doing the same thing has never been directed to do so. So that kind of just fell off the radar, right? So, you know, well, she's thrilled that she doesn't have to read these books. I, as her parent, am not thrilled, right? But I understand, like, I give grace to this, you know, the scenario, but I just, I'm a little bit, I guess, I don't know, anyway, let me word this different. I just think I would like to know that people are, or that given the new, you know, hybrid, you know, model, I would like to know that, you know, every student's class schedule is looked at and there won't be problems, because it's stressful enough for a student to enter a new model of school that they've never done before, but then on top of that they enter and then they're like, oh, well, I'm supposed to do this, but I can't do this, and you know, whatever. It's like I would like to know that somebody's reviewing that.
And every year we have students that have issues with their schedules, have to meet with counselors. In the spring, our counselors scheduled virtual visits with students, and I saw that live happening, and it worked really well. We may do some of that too, but we may also schedule some in person, like let's really sit down and hash through this. We also have brand new students coming in who don't have schedules yet, so we will be working on all of that.
Any other questions?
I guess, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but I think it's that important. On the survey and on the bullet points, I would just urge us to not let perfect get in the way of good. If we have something that gives meaningful information and lets people start planning their lives, let's fire it out there. I'm not saying it be full of typos, but if it's not elegant, that's okay.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think I found it helpful to say, based upon what we know today and these things, this is where we're trending towards, and it looks like that we have to be careful about it, and and communicate that there's an uncertainty there.
100%.
Yeah, but I think you're right.
I guess I shouldn't say it, but I will. But I mean, I understand your point that people need information, but I do think that anything put out from a board office of a school district has to be A+ material. You cannot put out anything better than, I mean, you even in a time crunch in any professional environment, your bosses require you to do the very best work, and I think that we're capable of that, and I think the expectation should be that.
Let me rephrase what I said, because I don't disagree with you. If it's not fully baked and every little detail is in there, I think that's okay. Clearly the details matter, clearly the format's important. I don't disagree with you at all, but I'm saying time is of the essence. So if there are some details, we'll have time to work through those details.
So maybe it would be good for the board to have a view of whatever is going to go out and approve, like have majority approval before it goes out.
Well, we can't, I mean, that would require, for us to approve anything would require a meeting.
Meeting.
I mean, now a committee could look at it. I mean, if you want to be on that committee, have at it. A small committee could look at it and agree with it, and it's not a binding action that we have to have an official
Right.
meeting on.
I think what you're saying is, given how important communication is, and that we don't have confusing information going out, having some process that includes multiple eyes looking at it from different perspectives to make sure that it won't be interpreted incorrectly is going to be important.
Right.
Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm fine if there's some people who want to volunteer for a committee.
Well, I volunteer.
This is a committee
Yeah,
I'm on
Okay,
enough
why
committees.
don't we work that out?
Yeah.
I don't wanna create a committee, but, you hired us to do our jobs, and we don't wanna create more, bureaucracy to it, and add layers and layers, so let us talk about that and maybe come to an understanding or a proposal.
Yeah, I get where you guys are coming from. I don't know what, maybe another set of eyes would give us another perspective. I'm just trying to,
I don't think it has to be a board member though, or board approval, or.
I don't know.
Well, I wouldn't advocate board approval at all, because that's
No.
just more meetings and an official process that is bureaucracy, but one or two people that are independent, I guess. Whether it's, I don't know if there's internal staff or.
My goal in stating that is that when you're proofreading documents, and especially something that's this important, it's a hard decision for parents to make, and it affects a lot of facets of their life. It's super stressful. For people, not going just back to normal school is so stressful for parents, because it affects their finances, their daycare, their sanity, on and on and on. We all know the list, right? So then to compound that by not having other people view that document and it maybe be received differently than you interpreted it, or maybe it does have a typo. Those are the type of things where, this is how I feel. I feel like 50% of the people are going to be mad at whatever you do, and 50% of the people are going to like you. But the way to really make the 50% that are going to not like you, but like the plan or be able to work with it, the people that are going to be in that ball game, if you then provide misinformation or don't provide enough information, or have everybody's on high anxiety or whatever anyway. So then if that's not perfect, if it's not a material, then you are making that group of people mad, and that's not what you want to do. So that is why I'm saying I think that it's just a good practice to let other people from different viewpoints and maybe look it over. It doesn't have to be me or anyone on the board, but I think it should be people that are parents, are professionals that right?
And I recognize the challenge. The challenge of that, it is surveys are extraordinarily hard to write to get unbiased report. It's everybody is biased based upon their experiences and their perspectives, and their own knowledge. So to try to communicate that to where it will be interpreted similarly between a lot of different people is extraordinarily difficult. And so we understand the challenges here. It's hard.
The only other thing I would say is if
I think most of us would make ourselves available if it would be helpful.
If it would help.
I mean,
I think there should be a proofreading process, but I think that's what you guys determine that is the best way to get that proofread and the message go out correctly.
why don't,
That helps.
why don't we, I mean, I guess I tend to lean to Leavenworth and figure that out, but there's people here that will help you out.
If needed. Makes sense.
Other questions? Did we get through everything that was sent in for the most part?
Yeah, look.
Well, if we're through the restart, I guess I would just entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
For a second?
Second.
Second, it's been moved and seconded by Justin and Stephanie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. How about on the phone, Chris? Karen? Aye. All right, thank you. Motion carried. With that, again, I think we've got a meeting on the agenda for Tuesday night. At this point, to try to get that date lined up, so same time, same place.
Are we canceling Monday? Was Monday canceled?
We never posted it online, so it never
Moving
officially
to
got,
Tuesday.
it never
Okay.
officially got
Okay.
listed. I mean, we put it in some correspondence, so I guess if we're communicating
Right,
out, we need
right.
to let the folks know but it
Usually the way
it
it
didn't
was.
officially get on the, well, I mean, the public looks at our calendar, and we have some patrons here tonight. So, all right, with that, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.